assuming that you can see my screen.
Yes, ma'am, Sen.
All right, let me move you guys out to the edge here. Okay, so as my title says, I would like to discuss a little bit about what we do once we collect information on the languages that we're working on. How do we manage that data? And what do we think is going to be happening with that data? What is the life cycle of that piece of data? And how can we make the most use of it through the analysis stage, as well as looking to the future of all the other people, including ourselves and our communities, who could be making use of the materials that we have so carefully collected, analyzed, translated, transcribed, and all the things that we do with one piece of data. Okay, this one wrote down. Let's see how this works. Let me go back up to the top of it. I'm scrolling through, you can see all of my, here we go. Taking a shot. All right. Do you see anything right now, or not? Do you see my screen right
now? No, ma'am. No, we can't see.
No, no, you don't. Okay.
Yeah, we can't see.
Let me try it again. I'm going to keep it in this view so I can move around a little bit better.
Okay, ma'am. We can see now.
All right. So in the past, when we've been looking at, you know, the kinds of data that we've seen, or the kinds of writing that we've seen, or collections of papers that we've seen, they're the works of the people from, you know, the colonial times, and even a little bit later into the 50s. And these names are familiar to you: Grierson, Pettigrew, Primrose, Daman. These are people that we know of in the Northeast. And then if you go to, you know, Luce's papers from, if you go a little bit farther to the east, and then Loeffler, who's done a lot of work, for example, on Burushaski. We have all of those papers of those people who are administrators or missionaries or researchers, and just happen to have a really good ear and have, or interest, and have collected information on language. And those things are, many of them published already, but not, and also nowadays available online, but not always put in the same place as the languages that they are described. So for example, Pettigrew has things on Tangkol Naga and on Manipuri. And so if you're studying Manipuri, I have noticed that many people don't read the Pettigrew, and so don't have some of that data from Pettigrew to comment on. For example, maybe there's been change in the language or so on. So it would be very nice to know where these things are and have them in the same place, or very easily accessible when you're thinking about working on a language, and you don't have to go looking for it. The other thing is that what we see today is a completely kind of new movement, very rich movement of people in language communities working on their own languages, grassroots efforts to collect language from people who may not be studying linguistics at all, and then people who are studying linguistics collecting information on their own languages. And we see that with all of the linguistics degrees that are being offered in India. They're still not enough, but at least we see more, and we see that they seem pretty stable. So University of Guwahati, we see JNU, Delhi, Nagaland, and so on. And so Tejpur, all of the centers for endangered languages. And so there's a real, it seems like not so much a resurgence of interest, but a stronghold of that. It hasn't died off, and we feel like we can really push forward to something even better and bigger with that beginning point. Of course, the CIIL has been around for a very long time and has continued to work steadily towards its goals of creating language descriptions. And very recently, IGNCA, the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, has come on board and said, hey, we have a lot of languages. We should be doing something about that. And we are an archive. We are an archiving body for Indian arts and culture. We should be involved in creating something for Indian languages. So it seems like there's a lot of good stuff happening. And I'm hoping this contribution of archiving piece will help strengthen these current day interests. So let me be more specific on what I mean about that. If you look at some of the things that we have seen in the past in terms of our products, what do we actually have at the end of the day after we've collected all our materials? We have a lot of these things like word lists and sentence lists, and then descriptions based on those sentence lists, right? So you recognize this. This is I found this yesterday. I was looking through all my materials for some other things, that I found a grammar of Kokborok from CIIL. It was published in 1976. But if you look at 1976 or 86, they look pretty much very similar. They cover all of the noun phrase, verb phrase, and then clauses, and they may have, so they're mostly based on short clauses, and they give you a nice overview of what the languages look like. And this is what we have a lot of also in Manipur University. I haven't seen a very recent grammar or description, but if you stop at like the 1990s, many of those things were also of shorter sentences and shorter clauses, which are very useful for many different purposes, including teaching the language, but they lack the kind of connected text, right? Another thing that CIIL did has a lot of are these sort of community support documents, like these published things like storybooks and nursery rhymes.
Excuse me, madam. Ma'am,
yes.
Can you increase the size of the slide a little bit bigger?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Okay.
And letting me know that it's not visible. I'm going to try it this way, and let me make sure that I can actually navigate. I may have to change a little bit, but this you can see now?
Yeah, this we can see, but it's little bit small.
It's still small for you?
Yeah.
This is filling my entire screen, so I'm not really sure. Would you like to bring it up on your side, because you have a copy of it? Would that make it?
Okay. Let me try then. Please stop your sharing, ma'am. I will share from here then.
Yeah, do that, and I'll just let you know next slide.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so is that better for you?
Yeah. Does anybody can it be seen, ma'am? My screen, can you see?
I can.
Okay.
I can see it.
Okay. I think the others also can see then. Yeah.
This is better. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So let's go to the next slide. All right. So I have also noticed over the several years now how in India right now, the practices for doing descriptive linguistics have been changing. And so people have been using audio and video recording. I traveled down to Hyderabad and had been talking to some of the students at the University of Hyderabad, and they had said, well, they were still working a lot with recording, but we're doing recording of mostly of wordless. But I know that in the Northeast, it seems like people are doing recording of other things as well. So things that may be of interest to communities, such as narratives and so on. So it seems like it's getting more and more common, especially since the equipment that we use is getting easier to use, and people are using their phones and so on. So there's a lot of audio and video recording going on. And of course, for people like when Priyanko is working, he does a lot of phonetic analysis. So He and Shakuntala at Gauhati, IIT, do a lot of that kind of recording. So people are learning the value of doing that. And we also know that one of the reasons why we do that is because funding agencies like ELDP and Firebird, so many of you in the audience have had Firebirds, or the Endangered Language Fund. These places now require you to archive and to record and archive what you've collected. So what they do when they're doing that is that they're also then giving you some tips, like ELDP gives you a how-to, it gives you training on how to do these things, and tells you specifically where to archive and so on. So it's become part of our general idea that we should be doing it. But let's ask ourselves the question, in India, are we really doing it? How many of us are doing the audio and video recording and then thinking about the life cycle of that data that we're collecting and taking it all the way to the archiving piece? A lot of us don't do it because it seems really difficult. It seems like something we will do later on. And it seems like if we do it, are we going to be sharing all of our information and somebody else is going to steal it? I mean, it seems like these are the three reasons why we don't see a lot of archiving going on in general. What is the process? And when will I have time to do it? And who's going to have access to it once I do the work? And what I would like to suggest is that we should try to think about archiving not as a final step, but as a second step. So the first step is you go out and do your recording. As soon as you do your recording, you start thinking in the long term about where that piece of information is going to go at the end, and you start planning for it right from the beginning. And that I would also like to suggest that doing that is going to buy us a lot in terms of both our description and the value of our documentation. All right, let's try to, oh, next slide, please. All right, so these is what I'd like to, these are the things that I'm going to talk about very quickly. And I know some of you have seen me talk about some of the software that is usable, but I'm presenting this in this particular frame. Say you went and collected a piece of data, what would your next step be? You collected a story or a word list or anything that you might collect, what would your next step be? So what we'd like to find is a way that we can, first of all, put what you've collected in a place where you can find it quickly and relate it to other pieces of data. Say I collect a word list, right? And I have in it many examples of tone. And the next time I go to find my word list, I find the word list, but I don't find where I've put the glosses or that other place where I put the tones markings on the same list that I'd collected, say 2 weeks after I collected the source file. I have the source file, which is the tone words. I have one folder or file where I went in and thought about it and wrote all the tones up. I may have another place where I have glosses where I've discussed things with the speaker, but they're all over the place and they're not there where I can find them quickly. How can I manage my files so that they are in a place where they are safe and I can find them very quickly so that I can move forward on my grammatical work? And how do I manage really large files? Like, what do I do when I collect a story? I think a lot of us may collect stories and we may do things like YouTube and then put in, nowadays a lot of people are doing this and it's wonderful to see that people are putting in the subtitling. So they've done some sort of transcription and they've done that. But where do we go from there? How do we use that somewhat further? So we've got the data, what do we do with it, right? So that's what we want to talk about for data management techniques. And then the second part of it is the archiving part. How do we preserve that? How do we provide access in the future to both communities for cultural, cultural kind of remembrance and celebration, and also for language teaching? And how do we provide that, what we've collected, to other researchers so they can study what we've studied and maybe reproduce our studies or replicate it in another setting. And for linguistic students who might want to learn more in terms of typology and just understand more about these languages. So the next slide, please. All right, so this is what we want to do is what are the steps of that data cycle for the data collection to management to deposit? So let's go forward. The first thing that I would point out is that if you read a lot of the literature on linguistic fieldwork now, people have you know, really encouraged this collection of connected text, and I believe that Linda Conard will be speaking about that later on in this webinar series. And so I know that also communities really want to be collecting things like traditional narratives and procedural texts and proverbs and so on, because that's what's really going to get at the core of cultural celebration and remembrance. So that is what we want. And nowadays, video recording is pretty much the standard. There's a very nice blog post by Lauren Gahn that you might want to go and look at to explain sort of how we've started thinking about video as being a basic necessity for this kind of documentation work. And then of course, you know that we have a lot of different types of grammatical discussion that we might collect. So we collect a lot of a variety of things. So the next slide, please. Okay, so once we collect that, I find that one of the things I've noticed is that, and I know you must share this experience with me. You're at a conference and somebody wants to show you something. They're like, oh no, that file is corrupted, or I can't find it, or I know I put it here, but it was my old computer that got broken, or I lost all of this material. And so you may also have experienced that yourself. So how do you, first of all, guard against that? And secondly, how do you find things very quickly? I have found this piece of software very useful. You can use any kind of software that you can find, or even your own homegrown way of organizing files. But the reason that I've liked this piece of software called Say More is, number one, it's free. It runs on PC, which a lot of us in India use. And it is something that you can learn and also teach somebody else on your project to use very quickly. It's not a complicated piece of software to use. Next slide, please. So when you open up a Say More project, okay, so let me just back up a little bit. The reason I'm going over this a little bit is because it teaches us about metadata. It teaches us about how to collect information about each piece of each file or each source file that we collect. So it helps us know that it isn't only for today that I need this information, but it is also for the archiving piece that I'll need this information. So I like to think about it in two different ways. One is project data management. So that's all of my stuff and how do I organize it on my computer? How do I find it quickly? How do I not lose it? And then archive data management, which is slightly different, although the information is related. If I start thinking about it from the very beginning, I collect my source file, I bring it to my computer and I say, I'm going to put it through Say More, and I'm going to collect metadata right away. It is very, very helpful because it's fresh in your memory and it's saved for now and for later. So that's why I'm talking about this. And I'm using Say More as an illustration to talk about metadata. So in Say More, you can collect information about three different things. One is the whole project, and that's what this landing page is about. And so you can say, you know, give it a title and a description. Very important to, I think, give something about who you are here so that you get, if somebody needs to contact you and, you know, all they have is your Say More project, they can get details from you. Next slide, please. The other thing that's very useful is this person tab where you can put in information about each of the people that you have received information from. Any of you who've been working for more than 2 or 3 years, for example, yourself on Uipu, you know that you've collected information from many different people already. and to keep, and there are community members that you know very well, but still after 5 years or 10 years, it becomes hard to remember that voice and that person. And so it is very useful to have a database somewhere that has a picture of them, the year of their birth, if you know it, perhaps an email, if they're on email, what languages they spoke. In our multilingual situations, people speak many languages. What other languages do they speak? And so on. And it also helps you keep track of a 3-letter or 2-letter code for this person that you can use in your file names or elsewhere. So you build a kind of a database for people. Next, please. And the other thing that's very useful is that you can put in something like a, now it's small for me too, so I have to put my glasses on to look at it. Okay, you can put in something like a video file, and from that video file, this program then allows you to very seamlessly, you don't have to go outside, you don't have to use handbrake or some other mechanism. This program will strip the audio from the video and allow you to go on to the next step of annotation within the same program. So what do you have so far? You went out to the field, you collected a video of a great story. You came back home, you put it on your computer, you named the file, you put it in Say More, you put in all the metadata about the person, and then you upload the file into the session folder. Session folder just kind of helps you keep tabs of each of the different source files that you've collected. And then you don't leave it just like that. You go one step further and you put in an annotation. So next slide will show us, I think, how that works. So what happens with Say More is that it strips the audio from the video, gives you an audio file. So you'll see up here, there's a video file and an audio file. And then it creates this grid for you. It makes them automatically segments that file. You can listen to it, each little segment, each little intonational chunk, and put in a transcription and a translation. And you can export that, what you've just created, as an EAF file, which is the thing that's used in Elan, or as a text file, or as a subtitle file, or for Flex. So I find that with Say More, what I would like to encourage people to do is to collect their source file, come home. First thing I do, run it through Say More, do the annotation, transcription and free translation, and I now have enough to send that file to archive. Because what do I need for archiving? I need the source file, which would be the video, and the EAF file, which adds value to that source file. It allows access to that source file for yourself and for other people as well. So you may ask the question, well, I don't know anything about this language. How am I going to transcribe the language? Yes, that is true. And one of the things that I have found very useful with Say More is when we've had visiting scholars here, for example, when Sumshot Kular was here working on Lamkan, her language, it took her a very short time to learn how to use this, maybe 1 session or 2 sessions at the most. And she was able to go in and start transcribing in orthography. And you know, the spelling is still variable, but it's not perfect, but it is 100 times, maybe 3,000 times better than having a file with no annotation in your long list of files that never then can have be accessed and used, and is never accessed and used by you either, because it hasn't been transcribed or translated. So I feel like one of the big goals is to do this kind of transcription and translation, however rough, as soon as you possibly can. Next slide, please. Okay, once you do that, what Say More does for you is it creates a number of folders for each session. And the next slide. And each one, then if you open up one of the sessions, it has every single file that is related to that sound file. In this case, you'll see that there are 2 Excel files. These were the kind of word lists that we used to then have somebody record. It was a script for recording I think we were looking at stress and at prosody of very long words. And so they were saying those, but we have both the transcript and the sound file all in the same place. So it doesn't only have to be sound files and the EAF file and so on. It can also be things like transcripts. And the next one. Okay, so now you may think, well, okay, I put it in Saymore. Now I'm going to go on and do my data analysis. What I would like to suggest is, yes, you have to do your data analysis, but you're also ready to archive because you have your source file and your EAF file ready to go, and you've named your files. Once you have about 20 files, you can contact an archive. And you can say to the archivist, I have a budding collection of my language. Let's say myself, let's say it's yours. You're ready to, you've been collecting a lot of information. And maybe you're like, okay, it's getting overwhelming. I really need to figure out the longevity of this. Let me contact an archive. And you contact the archive. Archivists are very nice. Talk to them and say, I want to bring my stuff. What do you need from me? Each of the archives, you know, some of these archives developed very rapidly because of need, and they are growing and changing as we speak. So Paradisic was very early. ELAR has gone through a couple of different iterations trying to make it easier for you to deposit. I think more and more the deposit process is going to be easier and easier. And so, for example, if you're depositing at Coursal, what you need is a folder with each of your source files in a folder and a spreadsheet with some metadata. And I've given you on the right-hand side here, the fields of metadata that are required. And you can, if you have collected this, when you're collecting it or in your Saymore, put this metadata down and you are good to go. So the title can be in English and in the language that you're working on. Each of these different fields, the explanation for them is on the Coursal website, and it's something that I would be more than happy to work through. We have created a Coursal depositor hour every Wednesday, and so we're going to move it, I think, to 8 a.m. Right now it's at 4 p.m., which would not be good for anybody in India. So we're going to try to move it to 8 a.m. People, you can just come and visit and do a kind of a quick tutorial on how to do this. It takes my students about half an hour to learn how to put the spreadsheet together, and they're ready to create that for the archiving part. So is archiving really so difficult? No, not really. Not if you do it this way, right at the beginning, right? Rather than waiting after you have 50 items. If you do it after you have 10 items or 15 items, then you already have a relationship with your archive. You've already made mistakes and made corrections. And for the next 15 and the next 50 or next 100, you know exactly what to do. And so this is what I'm saying, is to identify an archive very quickly, collect your metadata from the very beginning, know what metadata you need and collect it from the beginning. Think of your files as things that are going to not stay with you, but are going to be used in many different ways. So think about file portability. So save your file in XML or WAV format. Try not to use MP3 and so on. This would take a while to talk about, but yes, file portability. Think about consistent file naming, because you're going to have to, you need it for your spreadsheet. Always back your data up. And this is a great thing to talk to your archivist about. How do I back up my data? I don't have enough space on my Google Drive. Where do I put it? This is a good thing to talk about. Don't wait to archive, and be selective about what you archive. Don't think about archiving as a data dump, but think of it as a data collection, like a collection that you want to be proud of, almost like a book that you're creating, something that a lot of people are going to go and visit. So you want to be selective about what you put up there. Next slide, please. All right, so here's something that one of my students created along with Prafula Basumatari for his Boro collection. It's just a spreadsheet on a Google Doc, and it has, you'll notice it has the creator name, the role of the creator, the contributor. It's all of those things that we saw in the previous slide under the fields, and it just goes across in a spreadsheet. The next slide, please. All right, so we're getting close to, like, I only have about five, 6 slides left, I think, and what I'm trying to say, I think, is in the old days, that would include me, but people like me, we never knew that archiving existed, and so we never did anything about it. We never thought in terms of, you know, we kept our own projects managed in a certain way, but we didn't think in terms of moving things out to another place. And so it's very time consuming for us to do this work now. But that's what we call legacy materials, and there is a move to create archiving of legacy materials. I myself am very interested in this. Many of my colleagues are my age or slightly younger than me, and they are in the same bulk, the same. They need help bringing their stuff to the archive, but very precious materials. And we want to make sure. So I showed you the Kokborok grammar, right? A little while ago, I was showing you that I had found my Kokborok one from CIIL. I went to visit Jim Matisoff, and in his garage, he took me in there and he said, look, here are all my fieldwork materials on Kokborok that I collected in the 1980s from my field methods class. What do I do with these? I said, those are so precious because they're University of California, Berkeley students listening to some speakers talk about all sorts of things. There are stories and there are word lists and so on. So we brought those here to Porcelain. We're trying to digitize all of his materials and put them together with the things that Kokborok speakers would like to. So we're working with Debarma Sharma on creating a Kokborok collection based on those legacy materials from Jim Matisoff. Okay, you may know professors who are senior and who have a lot of materials that you think would be interesting to have in a collection, but would otherwise get thrown out. So please keep an eye out on that and think about what one could do with those materials. The Endangered Language Fund is very interested in supporting the archiving of those legacy materials. Then we have community collectors. We have language classes that might be happening, language and cultural events that might be occurring, where people may want to deposit some of those materials for long-term use. So there are a lot of different types of people who are doing depositing or who might want to deposit. And that's one of the reasons why I've been wanting to travel around and talk to different communities about the process. So next slide, please. All right. And then, yeah, could we go back one? Just, could we go back to this one? Okay, so you may think now, why does archiving really matter? And you may think it's just in order to save your materials in a safe place. And that's really just like the beginning of it. Like the technologies are growing so fast that I think the reuse of those, the value of what you're doing is going to be much greater just in the near future. For example, one of my colleagues here, Alexis Palmer, she's a computational linguist and she works with me and I work with her. We're working on a project on Dimasa and with Boro and Kokborok involved as well. But what we're trying to do is to figure out if you know one language really well, like we know Boro quite well, right? There's a lot of grammars and stuff. How can we use that information to then understand Dimasa, or how can we use that information to understand Kokborok? So using related languages to understand languages that we don't know anything about. Or there may be languages that we think we know a lot about, but when we start comparing against 3 or 4 of them that are closely related, we find out that the grammatical analysis is very different for each of them, and we wonder why. What happened? Are they really that different? Did they change over time, or did we somehow misanalyze one thing and need to reanalyze another? So comparing across languages is going to become something that is not like a pipe dream. It's not a dream for the future. It's happening right now. And the better archiving that we do, the more portable our our files, the more comparable they are across, the faster and the more exciting the grammatical descriptions are going to be. So I think we need to think a lot about this archiving piece to make that possible. People are doing a lot with voice recognition and with automatic transcription. And so if you have good files and just a little bit of very well transcribed pieces, then there are linguists who are working on trying to then do automatic transcription for the rest of them. So if you've archived things, if you've allowed for that kind of reuse, it'll make those types of new cutting edge research possible. And you, as a researcher, will be involved in that. You can be a part of that big piece if you're able to then provide that kind of data for use. Of course, one of the most important things that we do as language documenters is to provide for communities and to support community work on language teaching. And I'm really hopeful that in Corsal, and I think the other archives may be thinking about doing something like this, but I'm hopeful that in Corsal, we would use the subject keyword headings that the library allows to enter in 3 kinds of information. One that would be typological. So I might say something like, this particular source file, like this story, is great for optatives, or it's great for imperatives, or some sort of information about how a researcher can go and find a construction type there. Another keyword search that has to do with functional grammar. It's good for greetings. These are the kinds of things you say when you're angry, or something that has to do with interpersonal communication. And finally, keyword searches that had to do with ethno-linguistic things, good for botany or astronomy or cooking terms or what have you. And that will make that archival deposit useful for communities to retrieve more easily. They can do a search for everything that has to do with cooking and then look to see if they can reuse that for pedagogy. Finally, for this slide, archiving is really important for dissemination of your culture and your language, because you can make a big deal about that archive on an independent website. You can link to it in various different ways and say, go look at these deposits, and you can put a great landing page. You can have people really, you can be noticed, is how Uma Papaswamy from CIL says. The thing that we want is for each of these languages to have a claim to importance and to be noticed and to be valorized in that way, that they have something to offer, and they all, and as we know as linguists, they all do. Next slide, please. All right, and so you can go on our webpage, and there are ways that tell you how to deposit if you want to deposit a Corsal, but you can also go to ELDP, you can go to Paradisic, and contact the archivist to find out more on how to do that. Next slide, please. This is one of the things that we were thinking about in terms of a kind of a model, a way of both helping, encouraging the creation of archival infrastructure in India, but at the same time making sure that things that are happening right now don't fall by the wayside. So for example, you may know that Sikkim CEL has now gotten their, Karthik Narayan and Dr. Mairaba did work on several different languages when they were working at Sikkim and at that CEL, and they have all of that archived now at the Sikkim University Library, very secure, great infrastructure, and searchability and metadata, everything, all of the ingredients that you need are there. And hopefully we can reconstruct something of that in different centers around India. And in addition to that, have some sort of backing up of the raw data in a secondary place. People don't like to think about duplicating digital structures in many different places, but while this is growing in India, it would be good to have something. So for example, CEL funding may not be sustained forever in all of these centers. We hope that they will, but Sikkim, for example, may lose its funding, and then what happens to the archive? So we don't want to be in a position where it is in one place and then no longer sustained. We want this to be sustainable. So this is one of the models we were thinking about for that sustainability. So the next slide, please. All right. So I think I've talked about this already, and I feel that when you do your archiving and you're thinking about archiving, you do something like Seymour, you immediately create a much richer database for yourself. So your description will be much better than it was previously. Because previously you were collecting, I'm not saying you, a specific person, I mean, we as a group may have collected translations of sentences, but we weren't really looking at our connected texts because it was just too scary. There was too much there. But here, having thought about archiving first, we said we're going to run it through something like Seymour and at least give it a transcription and translation. We can now use that in Flex, or even just to eyeball it to find different constructions. But hopefully we could use something like Flex to then look deeper into it. It helps us know that a piece of data like connected text, like a conversation, does not have to be something that's scary and unattainable, but rather it'll enrich our descriptions and make it something much more than we had in the past, which was kind of that template-driven noun phrase, verb phrase, coordinate phrase, and then I'm done, thank you very much, I'm gone. Rather, it's a noun phrase, but here are how those noun phrases can differ in these different kinds of genres. Verb phrase, but here is all of the richness of that verb phrase depending on modalities and adverbials and all the other things that get left out when we just do sentence translations. So I think that this is going to help us if we can embrace some level of translation and transcription right at the very beginning. Next slide, please. The other thing that I think is really important with the archiving piece is that as language documenters, we know that we're serving a greater purpose than just collecting data for science. Many of you are working on your own languages. You know you're doing something really important for your communities. If we collect only words and sentences, how will that help our communities? If we want to help our communities, we need to connect things that will really be of use to that community. And that is always, I think, words are useful because you can get dictionaries out of those and learn a lot of things from them. Sentences are useful as well. But for culture dissemination and celebration, remembering, you need to have the connected text in a variety of those connected texts. So for language revitalization, we know that this is an important step, and we don't need to be afraid of it anymore because technology is helping us and we can help with this piece. So I wrote social justice there because it's really that idea of bringing everybody, all our cultures, regardless of the script or the number of speakers, to say that we all have important cultural contributions to, the mosaic, the Indian mosaic. And the way we can do this is to bring out to the public, look at our stories and look at our history and look at the way we think about food and look at everything that we do for our community, in our community and our cultures. And we can do this through our collections and through language and through really bringing that out with some sort of translation. There will be some things that you don't want to share because they were not appropriate to share. There may be some rituals that are just not, you don't think that the public needs to know about those. That's absolutely right. Then that's not something that you share. But there will be some things that you think this is something that'll really show people, help them understand who we are. And I think that archives can be one way to help do that. So the next slide, please. So this is actually the last slide. On our website, we have a tab that we've built, and we're working on it right now. By the end of the summer, we hope to have it finished. It is a community language documentation course. So any of you, and it's like Dr. Bijen Kumar, if you wanted to use it with your students, it's free. It has a series of readings. I'm hoping that we can have some of the people who are presenting here at your webinar series contribute their talks, and we can add those if necessary or links to them. But it takes people from step 0 to archiving, and it also provides some key references to Tibeto-Burman linguistics, along with sort of a primer for doing, it's like a typological primer for Tibeto-Burman, which would be, it's going to take a little while to finish that, but we've started doing a reading group to help us hit the high points and sort of give people an idea of how to also do some descriptive work. And so we're hoping that this community language documentation course will be of use. And I do invite you to come and check our website later on in the year. And if any of you want, any of my team, I have a number of students now working with me, come and go through that course with you, we would be very happy to do that. We can offer that over a course of, so, 3 or 4 sittings for your students or your community. And so thank you to Zoom for making all of this possible. And thank you for allowing me to talk a little bit about archiving and why I think it's going to be a really important force for change in our field and for our languages in the next few years. Thank you, Bijen. And I hope if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those now. You see there's something in the chat. Let me see what it says.
Okay. Thank you, madam, for your insightful talk about how to analyze and how to archive the language in a very lucid way. Thank you very much. Now, participants, it's time for our Q&A session. So I request participants to raise their hand if you directly want to interact with the speaker. Yeah. Yeah, if you have any question, query, any clarification, you can come forward. Yeah.
I am getting.
Yeah. Yes. iPhone. Yes.
How do I?
Yeah. Please speak now. Yeah, you can speak.
Hello.
Okay. Yes,
Hi.
madam.
Hello.
Hello, Professor Shobhana.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk. And we have gained a lot from your talk on archiving and all those things, because that is a problem which we have always faced. And you are, I think, facing dusk there right now.
Yes, it's still
all right.
but I'm sure very soon. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now you were talking about. Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you.
Hello?
Now we can see you as well. Yeah.
Okay. I must have booked something. Sorry.
Yeah.
I wanted to know about. Sorry. Yeah, I wanted to know your website address. I missed that out in the beginning. I think probably I could not really join right at the beginning. You were mentioning about your website.
Yeah,
Hello?
excellent question. Yeah, that's a very good question. It is. Yeah. I'm going to type it here in the chat to everyone.
Okay.
You can in your browser you type Corsal CORSAL.unt.edu, and UNT is my my university. It's the University of North Texas.
Okay.
HTTP whatever at the beginning, but if you type that, you'll see it comes up. And
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, madam. Now,
Wait.
okay. Yeah. So, Dr. Pogtang sir, yes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
I
sir.
think,
We can hear you.
Vijayan, I think Ma'am Mimi has another question, if I'm not mistaken.
Good morning, madam.
Yeah, we'll next now. We'll come to next.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We
Yes.
can hear. Please carry on, sir.
So it's nice to meet you, madam, once again over online. Yeah.
Very nice. Hi.
You to be here, but unfortunately we are caught up with Corona.
I know.
Okay. So your talk was very inspiring. So you raised many important points, and one of them concerns the use of all the importance of what do you call it? When we talk about text. So as you also have already said, most of the work, linguistic work or of any sort, suffers from this text. So in Northeast, especially, we really don't care to dig into the richness of text. But analyzing a text is not as simple as it sounds, and it's very tough. So most of us who are brought up in some sort of linguistic training, we are hardly exposed to this text. So text can surprise you with all sorts of materials, all sorts of irregular items that you don't we don't normally come across in elicitation of text. So one of the major points why students or researchers from Northeast India would not really dig into the richness of text is the difficulty that arises in glossing. So what sort of glossing should be followed? I don't think there is any uniform glossing pattern that one should follow, but what would that future researcher can benefit out of it? Thank you.
Well, I am so happy you asked that question because by the way, I want to tell you that in October, we are hosting the International Conference on Sino-Tibetan Languages and Linguistics, ICS-TLL, right? ICS-TLL 53. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is exactly what you're saying, Dr. Pautang, that is, we want to discuss glossing conventions and how we can make those things that are pedagogically helpful to people who are just starting out looking at languages. So many of us come from different traditions for annotation. We have different kinds of problems. One problem has to do with word spacing. Like for the languages you and I work on, if they're Kuki-Chin languages, we're not really sure exactly where to break things and how to annotate, whether we should be making, where our word breaks are. That's one issue that we face in creating like standardized glossing in Flex or something of that sort. The other thing is not knowing how granular or how detailed that analysis has to be helpful. Like, can I do chunks? Can I just put an analysis for several different words in one chunk, like one phrase? Will that still be helpful? And I think we're going to be discussing these questions, and I hope that our goal is that at the end of the year to come out with something like a guide that will not be a, you must do it like this, but it'll be some thoughts on and some helpful hints for exactly what you're talking about. It is so difficult when you see that and you feel like you have to gloss every single piece, but that's not really the case. I think you can gloss at different levels and it's still helpful to move your analysis forward. One thing is you cannot get lazy once you get a text, right? You get, as you said, there's so many mysteries in there and you go like, okay, I can't just lie and say, this is what it is. Actually, there's a lot more complexity. At least you can give those chunks and show the complexity. So to answer, yeah, so the short answer to your question, or long short answer is, yeah, we need this very badly. You're absolutely right. We need some guides to that. Everybody is welcome to come to ICSTLL. It is free. If you just contact me, and we're giving scholarships, we will have a limit to the number of people. I think it's 500 or maybe 1,000. I don't remember, but I'm sure we won't get to 1,000. But if you're in South Asia, you do not have to pay registration. So let me know if you feel like you want to attend.
So I think Shobhana has answered your query. Okay, Madam, can you see one query to your chat box that I have forwarded? Or should I? Okay, okay, ma'am.
Yeah, I can see. So the question is, how would you recommend going about data collection and analysis of folk songs and poetry of tribal cultures? So there's actually a bit of literature now on this, and what I can do is to share with Dr. Bijin. I can send it to him, and there are some how-tos. The best one that was published very recently, or maybe still in the process of being published, in Language Documentation and Conservation by Patty Epps, Anthony Webster, and Anthony Woodbury. And I think you will find it very useful because it is about how to document verbal art, especially what you're talking about. What are the kinds of ethnographic pieces of information you need to write down? What about recording and analysis? So I am not an expert in this by any means, but I really appreciated that article because it was so, you know, it was a methodology article as well as a history article. So yeah, definitely there are things that can be read about this.
Yes, still we have some more time, so we can take some question, query, clarification. Yes, and dear participant friends, if you have any query or clarification from the speaker, please raise your hand and unmute yourself and you can speak. Yeah, Priyanku, yes, please.
In the chat? Or?
No.
Yeah, it takes some time to, like, because he has to allow me to speak and then
yes.
mute the mic. So I was just wondering, what is the status of work on Blumkang? Because I went to your website and I see that you have a pretty good repository for Blumkang. And so is there any acoustic work that is going on at this point of time?
Let's see, the acoustic work that we've done so far. So, okay, this is a good question for the difference between the archiving and what kinds of results are going into the archive. So we've been talking a lot about selection. So in our archive, we're trying to put source files, and then some of those will include word lists and acoustic analysis, but things like prot annotation grids we're not putting in the archive. So that is something that we've been talking about, like, should we have a GitHub repository or should we have Zenodo or someplace, because those change, right? They change, they improve, and you still want to direct people to them. So we haven't put those in an archive yet. So the kind of acoustic work that we've done so far, we've done some on the vowels, specifically the ones that have those incredibly short sesquisyllabic-like vowels. We've done a lot of work on those, and we published a paper on that. We're working on tone, and we hope to be able to publish something on that tone aspect soon. And then we've done some acoustic work on the verbal complex and trying to discover how it's prosodically chunked. So what's the prosodic word versus the morphological word? And those transcripts and sound files are up on the web, on the archive already, but not the annotation grids. So we are still like, the selection stuff is still something that I'm trying to think through, because we don't want the archive to be, again, a data dump or a place where things that are going to be changing and growing as we go along to be put up there, or something that can be recreated later to be put in the archive. But I'm still thinking through that. I don't know, what is your thoughts about archiving of things like annotation grids? Do you think that that's, the Sikkim guys did do that? You need to be unmuted, right? I can do that. I think I can do that. Nope.
I think I.
Yeah, you have to unmute yourself. You can, yes, no.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. I think, like, it would be at least, like, some sentence level transcription, if it is provided, that would be helpful for a lot of people, of course, because in many cases we just don't want to publish a paper from the data as such, but some references sometimes are very helpful. Like, if I'm doing something on a related language, if I could also, like, get a sample from that language, and we get these kind of questions asked for journal papers, etc. So there is a work on such a language. What is the comparable, like, acoustics of in that particular language? So that would be,
yeah,
should be very to have. Yeah.
But that's a really good point. Yeah. So if we really want this idea of reproducible or comparable, then we should be providing those data sets that we use in a particular publication. So yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point. So we need to maybe think, so I'm not sure even what the metadata would be for that. Would it be just for that particular paper and say, this is the data set that goes with this paper? But certainly something I can bring to our group to discuss.
Right, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So still we can take 2 more questions. If anyone has any query, question, clarification, please come forward. I hope.
I am a little curious about people's ideas about open.
Okay. I think Alec has something to ask. I think I deleted something, so I'm confused. Alec, do you have something?
Hello, Bijan.
Yeah, yes, madam. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know how to put this across, but then those who are working on computational linguistics, they have this way of changing the glossing which we have done and the way that we have been taught. So how do we, like, kind of where is the meeting point between the pause tagging that the computational linguists follow and the glossing which we follow? Like, that is a problem which I've always faced, because we are glossing in a different way and they are doing it in a different way. So we have to change the way that we have glossed it. We need to redo it again so that they will be able to use it in their work. So is there a possibility of these two points of research meeting? Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think we should not be, it should not be necessary for us to actually change things, because at this stage, we can always add another line of annotation if people want to do universal part of speech tagging, or if they want to do, some other standard way that they are using another ontology, then they should be able to find that translation themselves and do it automatically. After all, they're computational linguists, so it should not be so hard to do. However, the conversation on what part of speech tagging is, how universal it is and how movable it is, that conversation is something that we linguists could really contribute a lot to. Where, you know, things are collapsed into one, we can say, no, you can't count a light verb and a main verb as one unit. We want to do it as 2 units because it's actually 2 clauses, or however our analysis goes. I think that conversation is going to be very useful. So what I would like to suggest is that we do a series of very small workshops, like just taking texts and working through the annotation with a computational linguistics group of people there, and just talking in those workshops with actual texts, not like at a theoretical level, but experts on those languages who know the annotation, and then the computational side with their ontologies, and looking at how we could automate, if they need to have it changed, how would we automate it? And secondly, do we agree with it and do we not agree with it? So I think that would be a useful thing to do. And I hope that we can do that in the future here as well. Baotang, did you want to ask something? You look like you're in the question mode.
Yes.
Hi, Al.
Aleku has something, yeah, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Vijen Kumar, and thank you, Shobhana, for an interesting talk, certainly an important one for all these languages. The question I've got for you is concerning dictionaries. I've been collaborating with Dr. Tenzin Ningsang for the last couple of years, and we've got some pretty good projects running at the moment based on We Say and the Rapid Words Collection. This is continuing. What I want to do in the near future with Tensor is create phone apps, dictionary phone apps, because they cost nothing to distribute in the communities. But I'm wondering if Coursal will also be interested in hosting online dictionaries as well, because we'll have it in our electronic format. Maybe it would just be good to have some expertise to help us. Maybe Coursal offers this and we could convert these into online dictionaries as well.
Right. So I think Coursal would be a good place to host your database file. Like, for example, I don't know what We Say outputs to. Is it a .db file or whatever it is? And with a version information in the metadata. So because those kinds of files like flex files or We Say files or our dictionary, they keep growing and changing. You know, we make mistakes, we make additions and so on. So we would be able to host that database file. Then in addition to that, but not central to Coursal, because Coursal is a language archive, it is not something that creates material. So, but I do hope that we can do training such as the ones that we're trying to do with archiving, training people on archiving, to also do things like how would you do webinary? How would you do a phone app? But they would be offshoots of Coursal and not central to Coursal. So when you say would Coursal be interested in, I think yes, the Coursal team would be very interested in doing that, but Coursal as an archive would not be, would not write that in their menu list of things that they offer. In the menu list of things that Coursal offers, there would probably be something that says training. And then the training would then have to include a number of different things. So if there was somebody after I retire who is interested in doing phone apps, then they would be the people to do it, or and so on. So that would be my, so what our digital librarian tells us all the time is we can't be everything to everyone. So, but I know that phone apps and pedagogical are important, so we'd want to somehow include it in the training component, but not promise it as part of Coursal. But that problem of databases and versions is another one that we're dealing with. Like, how do people decide, okay, they come back to us 2 or 3 years later and say, you know, that interlinear glossing that I did with Flex, it's completely out of date. I need to put this new one up there. Librarians typically don't like to delete old things. They would like to keep a record of it. So probably we would have version control. We would hide one and add the second one on. But the versioning would be an important metadata piece.
Okay, I think the speaker has answered to Kuf inquiry. Ma'am, we have a last query from one participant, Angsu, that I have forwarded to your chat box.
Okay, I'm going to read it out.
Yeah.
I have a question to the respected speaker. Do you support linguistic purism during data collection, analysis, and archiving? Languages are evolutionary in nature and are never static. Languages evolve with generations of speakers. In such a case, don't you think we as linguists need to also look into the dynamics? Again, if linguistic purism is adhered to, won't it be challenging in language maintenance and revitalization? Okay, so this is such an important thing again. So we have two choices, right? Or we have many choices, but here's two ends of the spectrum. One is we collect everybody's way of speaking. We collect elders. We collect elders from all different villages. We collect youngsters. We collect people who are outside of the village but living in Hyderabad or whatever. And we put that all in one big pool, and we try to come up with a grammatical description based on all of that variety. And we may have a hard time doing it that way because there may be a lot of variation that is hard to reconcile. But on the other hand, we don't want to be blind to that variation, because sometimes that variation itself reveals something about the structure that we wouldn't have understood before. So there are two different questions. It's like, what do we do about purism? But in terms of linguistic description, it is very useful to know about variation. And so we don't want to leave anything out by saying, one thing we don't want to do, I feel, and maybe Alec has something he could contribute here as well, is I think we don't want to say, this is substandard and I'm not collecting it. I think it's much better to say, I will collect it, but know that these are groups of people who have not lived in the village for many years. But still, I want to know what's happened to that grammar. I think knowing more is better than knowing less. And the second thing for linguists is that we don't want to ever, if possible, put any kind of value judgment on that grammar. We just want to say, this is how they speak. And these are the reasons why they may speak this way. Maybe one is an East village, one is a West village. We don't want to say East is better than West, because that's not what linguists are really, we're not trained to put judgments on things. We don't really know how to do that. So yeah, I don't know. Alec, did you want to add anything about purism? Or because Alec is the one who does a lot of work on dialects and varieties, and he's worked a lot in so many languages in Nagaland. Okay, so he will give a talk soon. He will talk about that perhaps. There's another question here. Oh, very good question. There are two questions. One is from Bijana that says, is there a kind of workshop where we can join in for us to be able to learn software and teach our students? Yes, let's talk about that. And we can do it online. And what we will do is do Say More and do that very slowly and get people used to it. And then we can do a flex one as well. If you want to do Elan, we can try Elan as well. That's not a problem. We can, now my students can do it as well. They've seen me do it so many times. They're very bored with my talking. So you can have them come and do the workshops with you. The other question you had is, what type of copyright is archive attached with? Okay. This is good because, on the archive, as soon as you deposit something, your name is there and you can cite that as a publication or something that you can put in your CV. If you go on the archive, you can see it says how to cite this item. That's not copyright per se. copyright is kind of complicated. It depends on the country and the country's laws, but it is definitely not plagiarizable once it's out there and it has your name on it. I feel like it's almost like a publication, like people cannot use it. They can't steal it from you because it's out there and it has your name on it. If they use it, they have to cite it. So I think that's actually a better way than not putting it out there. I know some people are worried about putting things out there and saying, I'm going to lose control over it. We've actually never seen that happen. There are a lot of things in language archives right now. I don't know if any of you have experience with that, but I think that it doesn't happen very often that things get stolen because people know that it's something that is yours. And so you can, and they can now actually use it and then they can cite it because it has a DOI, it has an identifier, it has a how to cite. And so that's my answer to the copyright. Somebody said, thank you, your talk has been insightful. Thank you very much. It's so nice that I see so many people, but I don't recognize many of you. So very nice to see so many new faces. Another question comes from Molly Varghese. So it's about language documentation and linguistic fieldwork training again. I think with this pandemic, many of these instructions are available online or will be soon. So yes, stay tuned, and I'm hoping that we'll have some, but the details of like how to do transcription and stuff like that, I don't know how much of that is available online yet, but I have a feeling there will be more.
Okay, thank you, Madam, for answering all the questions and queries from the participants. And as we are running out of time, if participants, dear friends, if you have any question and query, you can post to me. I will forward it to the Professor Shobhana, or you can mail directly. Then I think you will get answer to your query and questions. Now,